starting with breaking news at noon in Lower Manhattan, New York, where in just more than 2 hours, former President Donald Trump will appear in court for his arraignment. It is a historic moment for the nation as he will become the first former U.S. president to be arraigned in court on criminal charges.
This is it. This is actually happening, and the ramifications are staggering for the future of the American Republic. A federal court has just delivered a literal ticking time bomb to the doorstep of the presidency, giving Donald Trump a hard 24-hour deadline to surrender to U.S. Marshals. We are not talking about a suggestion or a request for cooperation. We are looking at a definitive judicial ultimatum. The ruling came down this morning with the force of a constitutional earthquake. Trump has until exactly 5 p.m. tomorrow, January 14th, 2026, to turn himself in voluntarily. The gravity of this cannot be overstated because the court has explicitly authorized U.S. Marshals to execute the arrest warrant at the White House itself if he fails to comply.
The former president briefly spoke before leaving Atlanta.
What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference.
We are staring down a scenario where federal law enforcement could potentially storm the halls of the president's residence to take the commander-in-chief into custody. This is unprecedented in nearly 250 years of American history. We are watching the greatest constitutional crisis of our time unfold in real time, with a literal countdown clock measuring the remaining moments of a presidency that has collided head-on with the judicial branch. Donald Trump's reaction to this news has been nothing short of explosive, and frankly, it is fueling the fire of this crisis.
And while our next guest is highlighting how President Trump has faced a series of losses when it comes to cases involving his power of the pen.
According to multiple high-level reports from within his inner circle, the president went ballistic the moment he was briefed on the deadline. He has effectively locked himself inside his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, choosing to hunker down in his private club rather than the Oval Office, and has spent the day live-streaming unhinged rants on Truth Social. In what can only be described as a digital meltdown, he is framing this legal action as a military coup and claiming that a shadowy deep state is actively attempting to overthrow the government.
The courts of appeals and now increasingly even the United States Supreme Court are saying no to Donald Trump's illegal policies, as you can see, 2/3 of the time.
Perhaps most dangerous is his rhetoric directed at his base. He is comparing himself to a political prisoner and telling his millions of followers that this is their moment to stand up. Federal law enforcement agencies are monitoring these statements with extreme concern, fearing that this language is a dog whistle for physical resistance or coordinated violence designed to block the U.S. Marshals from doing their job. To understand the legal mechanics of how we reached this precipice, we have to trace the trail of defiance that led here. This crisis didn't emerge from a vacuum.
Michael Cohen, the former personal lawyer of President Donald Trump, his personal attorney, surrendering to the FBI, entering a guilty plea.
It is the culmination of an arrest warrant issued after Trump repeatedly ignored a mandatory deposition order and allegedly engaged in the intimidation of witnesses involved in a sprawling financial probe. When his legal team attempted one last-ditch emergency appeal to block the warrant, the higher court didn't just deny the stay, they lost patience. In their ruling, the judges imposed this hard 24-hour deadline, writing that Trump's continued defiance and escalating threatening rhetoric toward the judiciary pose an ongoing danger to the integrity of the legal system. The court specifically cited his recent social media activity, including a chilling "Never Take Me Alive" post, as evidence that he may attempt to flee the country or incite a domestic insurrection to avoid the reach of the law. The message from the bench was final: no more stalling, no more games. The shift in Trump's political fortunes over the last week has been a jarring spectacle of whiplash. Just 7 days ago, the president was projecting an image of absolute global dominance after ordering military strikes on Venezuela and overseeing the capture of President Maduro. At that moment, his approval ratings saw a temporary spike, and his supporters in Congress were hailing him as the ultimate law and order leader on the world stage. Now, exactly 1 week later, the man who ordered the arrest of a foreign leader is himself a fugitive from a domestic arrest warrant.
At 10 a.m. this morning, the final door closed. For months, you have watched the legal maneuvering, the appeals, and the deliberate efforts to slow the wheels of justice. It was frustrating, I know. But today, the Supreme Court of the U.S. issued a definitive order. They did not just rule, they terminated the stay. This is what we call the issuance of mandate.
The irony is not lost on anyone in Washington. Democrats have already begun weaponizing this contrast, cutting rapid response advertisements that highlight the hypocrisy of a leader who demands international justice while defying the courts of his own nation. It is a devastating narrative that is currently dominating global news cycles from London to Tokyo, painting a picture of an American government in total internal collapse. The most immediate and terrifying operational concern is the crisis unfolding within the Secret Service. Because Trump is currently residing at Mar-a-Lago, the logistical challenge of an arrest is a nightmare. Reports indicate a massive internal rift among the agents on his protective detail. One faction of the Secret Service is reportedly prepared to fulfill their oath to the law by facilitating a peaceful surrender to the marshals to avoid a bloodbath. However, another faction remains steadfast in the belief that their primary, sacred duty is to protect the person of the president from any seizure or assault, even if that seizure is authorized by a federal judge. This is a jurisdictional black hole with no established protocol. A sitting president has never been the subject of a criminal arrest warrant while in office, and the question of which federal badge takes precedence, the marshal or the Secret Service agent, is currently being debated in frantic high-level meetings. The Secret Service director was recently seen entering an emergency session with the Attorney General, but sources say clarity remains elusive as the deadline approaches. Simultaneously, the legislative branch is reacting with unprecedented speed. In the halls of Congress, the impeachment machine is revving up once again, with House Resolution 353 heading for an emergency floor vote. The Democratic leadership is arguing that the president's refusal to comply with a lawful court order is, in and of itself, a high crime and misdemeanor that demands immediate removal. They contend that a president who declares himself immune to the judicial process has effectively abdicated his office. While many MAGA Republicans are dismissing the move as political theater or a weaponization of the courts, those representing swing districts are beginning to waver. The political math is changing. Defending a president who is technically a fugitive from justice is a liability that many are finding too heavy to carry as the 2026 midterms loom on the horizon. The logistics of this 24-hour surrender window are mind-boggling. Under a standard scenario, Trump would coordinate with his attorneys to arrange a time to turn himself in at a federal courthouse in Florida. He would go through the standard processing, the fingerprints, the mugshot that would undoubtedly become the most famous image in history, and the formal reading of charges. This would be followed by an immediate, high-stakes bail hearing. Legal analysts expect the prosecution to argue for detention without bail, pointing to his social media posts as proof that he is both a flight risk and a danger to the community. Trump's lawyers, on the other hand, would argue that the President of the United States cannot be held in a cell, proposing instead a strict house arrest with round-the-clock electronic monitoring. However, the bunker or fortress scenario is what has national security officials losing sleep tonight. If Trump decides to refuse the surrender and orders his private security detail, augmented by the former military contractors he has reportedly hired to create an armed perimeter around Mar-a-Lago, we are looking at a domestic siege. The court has given U.S. Marshals explicit authority to use whatever force is necessary to execute the warrant, which includes the legal right to breach the gates of the estate. If federal marshals attempting to enter are met with physical resistance from the Secret Service or private guards, the United States enters a state of total executive branch anarchy. This isn't just a legal dispute anymore. It is a potential physical confrontation between different arms of the American government. The political context is made even more volatile by the state of the MAGA base. To his most ardent supporters, the arrest of Maduro was a victory for real justice, while the warrant for Trump is proof of a corrupt two-tier system. Trump is intentionally leaning into this, framing himself as a martyr for a movement that he claims is being hunted by the state. This ensures that when 5 p.m. tomorrow arrives, the gates of Mar-a-Lago won't just be surrounded by law enforcement. They will be surrounded by thousands of protesters from across the political spectrum. The potential for a flashpoint that triggers widespread civil unrest is higher than at any point since the 1860s. Let's game out the 4 most likely scenarios for tomorrow evening. Scenario 1 is the orderly surrender. This is the path the courts and the Department of Justice are hoping for, a quiet, professional transfer of custody. However, this requires Trump to admit he is subject to the rule of law, an admission he has spent a lifetime avoiding. Scenario 2 is reluctant compliance. In this version, he refuses to arrange a surrender, but allows the marshals to take him when they arrive at Mar-a-Lago, using the moment to scream about persecution for the benefit of the cameras and his live stream. Scenario 3 is the active resistance nightmare, a barricaded estate and a long-term standoff that could turn violent. Scenario 4 is the wild card. Trump uses his private jet to flee the country before the 5 p.m. deadline. While it sounds like the plot of a political thriller, his own lawyers have reportedly had to intervene to talk him out of exploring this very option. If he is taken into custody, the constitutional questions only get deeper and more complex. We would find ourselves in a legal wilderness. Can a sitting president govern from a pre-trial detention facility? Can he meet with the National Security Council or sign executive orders from a federal cell? These questions would be fast-tracked to the Supreme Court within hours. A ruling on the pre-trial detention of a president would fundamentally and permanently reshape the power of the executive branch. Even a house arrest scenario would be crippling. No world leader, friend or foe, will take seriously a president whose every move is dictated by a court-appointed monitor and an ankle bracelet. Should the House move to impeach and the Senate find the courage to remove him, a process that would require 17 Republican senators to join the Democrats, J.D. Vance would ascend to the presidency. Vance has spent the last 24 hours in a state of carefully calibrated silence, neither defending Trump's defiance nor condemning the court's order. If he becomes the 48th president, he will immediately face a choice that will define his legacy. Does he issue a full pardon to Trump in an attempt to heal the nation, or does he allow the criminal process to reach its conclusion? A pardon would satisfy the MAGA base, but would likely be viewed by half the country as a final corrupt act of complicity, potentially triggering his own impeachment. We are currently witnessing the ultimate stress test of the American experiment. The core question at the heart of this crisis is whether the United States is truly a nation of laws or simply a nation of men. If the courts are unable to enforce their orders against the most powerful individual in the land, then the Constitution becomes a hollow document. If the marshals succeed and the rule of law is upheld, it reaffirms the foundational principle that no person is above the law. The clock is ticking toward the 5 p.m. deadline tomorrow. The eyes of the entire world are on Florida. Mar-a-Lago has been turned into a fortress, the U.S. Marshals are on high alert, and the Secret Service is paralyzed by a conflict of duty. We are standing on the edge of a definitive breaking point in American history, and by this time tomorrow, the nation will never be the same. The economic fallout is also beginning to manifest as the global markets react to the instability of the world's reserve currency and its primary superpower. Bond yields are fluctuating wildly as investors price in the risk of a domestic conflict in the United States. In the halls of the Pentagon, there are reportedly quiet conversations about the continuity of command should the commander-in-chief be detained. The global perception of America as a stable democracy is being dismantled in real time, and it will take generations to rebuild the trust that is being vaporized in this 24-hour window. To our community here, thank you for being the check on power that the mainstream media refuses to be. We will be tracking the movement of every federal vehicle, every private plane, and every judicial filing as we approach the final hour. This is not just a news story. This is the story of our lives and our democracy. Make sure you are subscribed and that your notifications are set to all. We will be live throughout the night and into the 5 p.m. deadline tomorrow to bring you the unfiltered truth of this historic reckoning. Would you like me to look into the specific constitutional history of the arrest of a sitting president to see what the founders actually wrote about this contingency during the Constitutional Convention? This could provide a clearer understanding of the original intent regarding executive immunity versus judicial power. Let me know if you want that deep dive into the history of the convention. We are here to give you the context that matters during this unprecedented hour. The role of the National Guard in Florida is also a developing story. Governor DeSantis finds himself in a political vice. Does he deploy the Guard to protect the president's estate from federal law enforcement, or does he assist in maintaining the peace during the arrest? Any move by a state governor to interfere with federal marshals would represent a neo-Confederate challenge to federal authority that hasn't been seen since the era of integration. The dual squeeze on Trump is now a triple squeeze: legal, political, and physical. As we conclude this segment, remember, the law only has power as long as we all agree to be bound by it. Tonight, the man at the top is testing that agreement. Tomorrow, we will see if the agreement holds. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay with us. This is The Ethan Show, and we are documenting the end of an era. The investigation into the secret audio and the unedited body cam footage from the recent ICE shootings will also play a major role in the bail hearing should Trump be arrested. The prosecution is expected to use these materials to demonstrate that the president's state of mind is one of total lawlessness. If the world hears the raw audio of the orders given during the Venezuela strike or the Minneapolis tragedy, the public pressure on Republican senators to vote for removal will become an irresistible force. The walls are not just closing in, they are collapsing. Don't forget to join our newsletter for the full list of charges as soon as they are unsealed. We are pushing out a special edition at midnight to prepare you for the deadline tomorrow. The link is in the description. We are building a movement of informed citizens who refuse to be gaslit by the propaganda of the state. Your engagement is the only thing that keeps this channel independent. Let's reach our next milestone together. The clock shows less than 20 hours remaining. The marshals are in position, the world is watching, and the countdown to 5 p.m. continues. See you in the next update.